Friends, welcome to the B-side of I Really Want to Stay at Your House, specifically Wither Away's cover of I Really Want to Stay at Your House. Everyone in the class has heard me talk, I think, about Cyberpunk Edgerunners and about the song I Really Want to Stay at Your House. And I've mentioned to Jana specifically this cover by Wither Away that made the playlist. And so in this B-side, I'll be explaining to you why that is. So I've spoken a lot about about curation and how I want to avoid it. But this song's inclusion is a surrender to my curation. This was always going to be here. I've mentioned the anime the song is attached to, Cyberpunk Edgerunners, as something that's taken up real estate in my head ever since I watched it. And so I use this project about mourning as a chance to pull on that thread a little bit. So speaking again of bodies as proof we're here, I want to share with you where my body was the first time I heard this song. Not Wither Away's cover, but the equally good original by Rosa Walton. I was crying in the rain at a bus stop trying to pull myself together. I don't remember which came first, me crying or me hearing the song, but after that, they became linked. I have not been able to hear this song, or any cover of it, without crying. So that brings us to why I chose Wither Away's cover. I remember my roommate and I discussing the song, the anime, and covers of the song. Specifically, we listened to an acoustic cover that made us cry. Full disclosure, I think acoustic covers or slowed down plus reverb covers on YouTube are a horseshit trick, to borrow a turn of phrase from Ross. It is a horseshit trick to tug on the heartstrings and jerk out a tear. And because it's horseshit, no acoustic cover was ever going to make this list. Ant mentioned in class Midwest Emo intro. They mentioned specifically the singers using a voicemail from their ex, but I was familiar with it in the context of But It's a Midwest Emo intro. To name some good ones if you're curious. Marriage Story, But It's a Midwest Emo intro. BoJack Horseman, But It's a Midwest Emo intro. This, though, is what Ross might call the full of shitness in me and in everyone, because Midwest Emo is probably a horseshit trick, the horseshit trick, but I enjoy it anyway. I know it's horseshit, I really do, to take something that's already sad, like a voicemail or a clip, and make it sadder with a riff. It's just as horseshit as adding an acoustic guitar. And yet, for more good cries, I kept wanting to listen to more of I Really Want to Stay at Your House. I wrote in my MP1 about there being no universal mourner, which is perhaps why I wanted to keep hearing covers of this song, to keep hearing more mourners. It took me a while to find Wither Away's cover, but when I did, it was already my favorite, and the one cover bound to end up in this list. Even the band's name had me intrigued. I don't want to spoil the anime, but I will give a contextless spoiler. At the end of Cyberpunk Edgerunners, Lucy has no body to mourn, which returns us, again, to Ross and the idea of a body being proof of life and a question. What do we mourn if there is no physicality? What do we mourn once the subject of our mourning has withered away? The song isn't by Wither Away, and so I don't necessarily want to spend too much time with the lyrics, though I certainly could, since the lyrics weren't theirs, and I want to talk about their contribution to the song in a couple of moments. That's why I chose their cover. But to briefly talk about the lyrics, the opening lyric is, "I couldn't wait for you to come and clear the cupboard, but now you're going to leave with nothing but a sign." And I wrote here, one of the questions in my MP1 was, who should we mourn? Specifically, why are we going to mourn someone? Or why is the singer who chooses to give us this mourning going to mourn someone who's going to leave us with just a note on a cabin or something like that? And I remember when in Inciting Joy, Ross talks about his father being a complicated man, but as complicated as his father was, he was mournable. And so whoever we're singing about here, who's going to leave us with just a sign, and the next part of that lyric is another evening, I'll be reading in between your lines, is a very complex person, but they're still a mournable person. And so that lyric stands out to me, the complications of mourning. And then, so get away, another way to feel what you didn't want yourself to know, and let yourself go. Turn away, another way to be where you didn't want yourself to go. Let yourself go. I'm going to touch a little bit on the whole let yourself go as an idea and about the surrender in the mourning process. But first, I want to talk a little bit about Dr. Winrock's class and how in that class we read Christina Sharp. And one of the things Sharp talks about is this story where a white woman came up to her at a museum to apologize because she felt quite guilty as the museum for her uncovered, the deep history of racism in America. And Christina Sharp talks about the violence in that moment that this woman attempted to give her mourning away and, forced Sharp to carry the burden of that. And so I wrote a little in my notes about the violence of giving someone, the work of mourning. In my MP1, I talked about how during Heavenly, which is also annotated on this playlist, Heather Baron Gracie did not want to be mourning, and yet here she is because of this partner. And so here, the singer doesn't want to be mourning, right? That's why they say it's something, they're feeling what they didn't want to let themselves know, or that they are somewhere they didn't want to be. And so it's this idea of unconsensual mourning. And then one of the lines is, "There's a party soon. Do you want to go?" And I thought about Ross here when Ross talks about the hang and inciting joy and the difference between a party and a hang. So the singer wants to go to this party to try and work things out with their partner, which is a horseshit trick. If you're at a point like this, you can go to as many parties as you want, but I also think about that. That's the difference between the party and the hang, right? Ross says that the hang isn't planned. There's no times, there's no destinations in mind. And I wrote in my notes for this project that you shouldn't be partying with your partner. You should be hanging with them. You can go to parties together, but it shouldn't be like this. And it says in my notes, that's a horseshit trick about offering to take your partner to a party when you're in this situation. And then I wrote, "But you know how much you broke me apart. I'm done with you. I'm ignoring you. I don't want to know." And so returning to the idea of surrender, I read Barth's, and one of his notes as he mourns his mother says, "I'm entrusting myself to the banality that is inside of me." And I wrote about that he just has to trust the originality in himself, and that even if he can't say anything new about mourning, it can at least be useful. And so that's what this lyric is centered on for me. I don't think we have anything new to say about mourning. And I don't even think we have anything clever to say about mourning. This is not a clever lyric, but it's real and honest and it's raw. And I think that might almost be more important, that rawness. And then this is the lyric that's my favorite of all time currently, and also why I included Wither Aways, is he says, "I'm aware that you are lying in the gutter, because I did everything to be there by your side." And what Wither Away does here, that really got this thinking started for me, is they let out this frustrated scream that I replay over and over when I listen to the cover. So I'm not even going to try to do it, but they sing, "I did everything to be there by your side." And it's like this tormented wail of anger and frustration. And I've talked so much about sanitizing the grieving process. And to me, that's the line that speaks to it the most, this real moment of anger and frustration that just slips out of them as they mourn. And that's why I didn't include Rosa Walton's original, because Rosa Walton's original, at least to me, is beautiful. She has an incredible voice, and it feels very curated, whereas Wither Away, he screams in frustration and anguish. And he does this a few times in the song. Before he launches into the final chorus, he sings, "Is that a compromise?" And he screams out the end of "compromise." And that's another one of my favorite lyrics, speaking of, the horseshit trick nature of this. You can't compromise when it comes to mourning. You're mourning or you're not. And so it's just so much more real and raw than the Rosa Walton version, hence why it was included. And one of the questions for my MP1 was, can we plan when we mourn? And I was thinking about this a lot because it's an intentional choice for Wither Away's cover. But that moment of frustration might be unintentional. I remember, if I were to do my own cover of "I Really Want to Stay at Your House," I don't know where my frustrated scream would come out, if it even would. Because I don't think we can mourn on command. I remember one Friday, there was this thing with the girl, and I wanted to just have a good cry to get it out when I got home on Friday, but I couldn't. And then, the next day, I just couldn't stop crying. And so I think about, that frustrated scream of if he chooses that, if he doesn't choose that, this idea of can we mourn on command or not? And, that's why this cover is what made it. Because to me, it just refuses to sanitize mourning and it just lingers in that rawness of it.